Most men enter the game of life, whether in relationships, at work, or in social dynamics, believing that to win they have to give themselves up. Give their time, attention, energy, and feelings. They confuse vulnerability with value. They think that showing everything they feel, everything they think, everything they want is a sign of strength, when in fact it is the greatest demonstration of emotional fragility. The harsh truth that no one likes to hear is this: who gives everything loses everything. Not because the world is cruel, but because too much exposure turns value into banality. When you give too much of yourself, show too much of yourself, reveal too much of yourself, you become predictable. And the moment you become predictable, you lose your power. We live in an era where men are taught to chase, to justify, to explain. Show that you care, they say. Show interest, they insist. But no one warns that excessive interest is interpreted as desperation. That the man who kneels emotionally believing that this is proof of love is, in fact, handing over his authority on a silver platter. This kind of surrender, emotional, desperate, unfiltered, does not attract respect. At most, it arouses pity. And what does Machiavelli teach us? That it is better to be feared than loved if one cannot be both. But in practice, what does this mean? It means that a man must, above all, maintain control. And the first control he must have is over himself. You will never master the game if you do not master your own thirst for validation. Because this thirst, disguised as affection, care, and attention, is perceived as weakness. Those who show too much that they need it automatically show that they do not have it. And those who do not have self-worth, who do not know how to remain completely silent, will always be slaves to the opinions of others. Pay close attention. The men who lose the most in the social and emotional game are those who are always trying to please. Those who ask, "What do you want? What can I do? How can I improve?" They don't understand that by doing this they are putting themselves down. They are saying, "I'm not enough. Mold me however you want." That is not love. That is submission disguised as kindness. And why does this happen? Because modern man has been trained to believe that presence is proven by excess, that he needs to be available all the time, respond quickly, be understanding at any cost. But he doesn't realize that by doing this, he becomes predictable, uninteresting, and emotionally manipulable. Mastery is not proven by speaking. It is proven by silence. It is not built by haste, but by pause. The true man who dominates the game is not the one who speaks the loudest, but the one who speaks the least and observes the most. It is not the one who runs after, but the one who walks firmly and forces the world to follow him at his pace. This is the hidden code that no one teaches you. The game is not won by those who give up, but by those who remain whole. And when I say whole, I'm not talking about coldness. I'm talking about lucidity, clarity about your own value, knowing that your time, your energy, your attention are rare currencies, and the more easily you give them away, the less value they have. So if you want to start changing the game, stop giving in right now before you are respected. Stop chasing after those who don't reciprocate. Stop explaining your value to those who don't see it. Because from the moment you feel the need to justify yourself, you have already lost half of your presence. Machiavelli did not teach flattery. He taught strategy. He did not say, "Conquer by love at any price," but rather, "Govern by perception. Impose yourself by presence." And your presence begins where your need ends. The real code to mastering the game is simple but brutal. Don't give up. Observe yourself. Control yourself. Value yourself. Because no one respects a man who emotionally lays himself at the feet of another person, hoping that this will generate love. Respect is born when you show that you don't need to be accepted to keep going. When you make it clear, without having to say it, that you are enough on your own. Stay with me until the end, because now that you understand the mistake, I'm going to show you the 5 principles of the Machiavellian code that transform any common man into a key player in the game, without having to give himself up emotionally. Now that you understand the fatal flaw of emotional self-surrender, it's time to turn the key. Most men live on emotional autopilot, reactive, predictable, emotionally exposed. Machiavelli didn't write for that kind of man. He wrote for strategists, for those who want to stop being manipulable pieces on the board and become the ones who move the pieces in silence. For that, there is a code that doesn't depend on shouting, promises, or desperation, but on inner mastery, awareness, and presence. The first principle is simple but brutal. Never show thirst for control. Thirst reveals desperation, and desperation drives away respect. The man who tries to control everything, the woman's feelings, the direction of the conversation, the speed of the connection, is actually the most out of control. The need to dominate externally arises from internal insecurity. Consider the typical example of the man who feels ignored and starts demanding, asking, invading. He thinks he is reaffirming his place, but he is only showing that he has completely lost his bearings. Machiavelli once said, "He who must appear powerful all the time, in fact, has no power." True dominance is quiet, invisible. It is the man who watches in silence while the world tries to decipher him and fails. The second principle is to be the emotional anchor, never the storm. In the midst of chaos, he who remains calm becomes king. We live in a noisy society, full of emotionally unbalanced people, where any provocation becomes a trigger. The man who dominates the game is not the one who responds in kind, but the one who can look at the situation with strategic coolness. Imagine an argument. He provokes, shouts, cries, tests. The weak reacts. The strategist breathes and responds firmly, without raising his voice. He does not fight the chaos. He sucks it in, dissolves it, and imposes his presence through calm. Because, in the end, whoever does not become unstable dominates whoever gets lost. Third principle: give less, inspire more. Value lies in scarcity. The most common mistake men make is to believe that, in order to win someone over, they need to give themselves completely. Show everything, tell everything, always be available. But the more you reveal yourself, the less interesting you become. What is completely accessible loses its mystery, and mystery is what maintains respect. The man who speaks less, who appears selectively, who keeps more than he shows, he is the one who is remembered, because he does not impose himself through quantity, but through depth. Each word becomes a symbol, each gesture an impression. Machiavelli teaches that image is more powerful than essence, and whoever dominates his own image dominates the perception of others. The fourth principle: touch the ego, not the need. People don't move by logic, they move by the need for validation. And validation doesn't come from desperate emotional surrender, but from the ability to strategically feed the other person's ego. This isn't manipulation, it's understanding how the game works. When you learn to give compliments at the right time, to surgically recognize what the other person needs to hear, you take invisible control of the situation. The mistake is to confuse this with flattery. It's not about bowing down, it's about knowing that by giving a small dose of validation, you guide the emotional direction without losing your position. It's like holding the reins of a wild horse without using force, just with the right posture. And the last principle, the most lethal of all: let go with power, not with pain. Most men only show strength when they are trying to conquer, but true power is revealed when it is time to leave. When everything falls apart, when the connection is lost, when absence arrives, that is when the strategic man shows his nature. He does not beg, he does not cry, he does not fight desperately to hold on to something that has already expired. He stands up, he disappears, he leaves the void in the place he occupied, and it is in this silence that his presence screams the loudest. He who can leave the scene without looking back demonstrates the kind of strength that does not need to be explained. A well-managed absence is more cutting than 1,000 words. These are the 5 pillars of the Machiavellian code for dominating the game without giving in. They are not magic formulas, they are lenses that completely change the way you position yourself, because the man who internalizes these principles will never again beg for attention, affection, or respect. He does not ask. He imposes, with posture, with silence, with presence. In the next step, I'll show you what happens to men who ignore this code, men who try to be loved at any cost, and end up paying with their dignity. Stay with me, because now we enter the most dangerous point, the fatal mistake of negotiating your worth to be accepted. Now that you know the principles of the Machiavellian code for mastering the game without giving yourself away, it's time to face the darkest and perhaps most painful part of this process. Understanding the price men pay when they ignore this code. Because the real problem was never losing a person. The real abyss begins when a man loses himself trying to be accepted. It's easy to see this in everyday speech. Men who say, "I did everything for her. I changed who I was. I accepted things that hurt me just to keep the relationship going." And then comes the burning question, was it worth it? The answer almost always is no, that's the point. The man who negotiates his value to be accepted is digging his own prison. And the most dangerous thing, he doesn't even realize he's trapped, because the cell is comfortable, decorated, emotionally packed with phrases like, "It's for love, I'm trying hard, one day she'll see my value." But she won't, because no one respects someone who gives up their essence to be loved. Love that comes from self-denial is not love, it's dependence. Imagine this scene: you enter a relationship. At first you are you, authentic, present, with boundaries, with vision, with posture. But then fear starts to speak louder, fear of losing, fear of not being enough, fear of being alone. And then you start to give in. You give in to a comment that hurts you. You give in to a demand that diminishes you. You give in to a behavior that goes against your values. At first it seems small, but over time you disappear. And what remains there is just the shell of who you were. With every meaningless concession, with every silence that hurts your truth, you are telling the world, and her, that you are not enough, that you need that acceptance to exist. That is not love. That is self-abandonment. And self-abandonment always exacts a price, the total loss of your emotional authority. Machiavelli once said that a prince who tries to please everyone loses everyone's respect, because power lies in clarity. And clarity demands choices. It demands that you accept losing some so as to never lose yourself. The problem is that modern man has been conditioned to mold himself, to adapt, to be an understanding partner, even when that means swallowing his own dignity with a smile on his face. But understand, you can be kind without kneeling. You can be present without being self-effacing. You can be empathetic without being manipulative. The point here is not to become cold or cruel. The point is to understand that your integrity needs to be more valuable than any external affection. Because when you trade your essence for connection, connection becomes a chain. And here comes one of man's greatest emotional tragedies, the fear of loneliness. Many people stay in toxic, destructive, or mediocre situations, not because they love someone, but because they are terrified of being alone. They would rather be mistreated than face their own emptiness. And that is extremely dangerous. Because a man who is afraid of being alone is always vulnerable to emotional abuse. He accepts crumbs thinking he is being strong, when in fact he is living as an emotional prisoner. Worse, he starts lying to himself. He says that everything is fine, that he is maturing, that he is being patient, but deep down he knows he is being a coward. He is denying his truth in the name of a peace that only exists on the surface. Because deep down, he is screaming. And the longer he lives like this, the harder it is to reclaim his own identity. Therefore, the Machiavellian code is not just about external strategy. It is, first and foremost, about internal reconstruction. It's about remembering who you were before you bent over backwards to please. It's about reclaiming the strength that was buried by fear. It's about learning that your peace can't depend on anyone else's validation, that the respect you want from the world starts with the respect you have for yourself. You need to understand, not every abandonment is a loss. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is to be rejected by someone who doesn't respect your essence. Because when that happens, you stop acting. You stop trying to be what you're not, and you finally start walking with truth. The pain of losing someone is fleeting, but the pain of living a distorted life, of looking in the mirror and no longer recognizing who you have become, that pain is eternal, because it eats away silently, one day at a time. And the worst part? No one sees it, because you have learned to smile even when you are destroying yourself inside. So, enough is enough. Enough of decorating your cell. Enough of wearing armor that only hurts you on the inside. Enough of silencing your truth for fear of being alone. True freedom begins when you decide that your dignity is not for sale. When you understand that those who need you to nullify yourself never deserved you. Explaining dignity to those who cannot see it is like throwing pearls before swine. They won't understand, and you'll wear yourself out trying, so stop trying to convince. Start showing it. With presence, with silence, with strategic distance. Respect is born when you prove, with actions, that you'd rather walk alone than bow down to be accepted. The man who asserts himself with truth may even lose some along the way. But what remains is honor. And honor is the only thing that no one can take from you, unless you give it away. In the next and final step, I'll show you how it all fits together. How an unforgettable man is one who never bends, who doesn't need everyone's approval, just the respect of those who are right. Because he understood that living with truth hurts less than living with a mask. And if you've made it this far, it's because you're ready to stop negotiating with the world and start aligning with who you were truly born to be. We have reached the end, but this end is not a full stop. It is a call, a cut in the veil of illusion. Because after everything you have read so far, there are only two paths left. Continue living double, negotiating your value to fit in, or raise your head and choose to be unforgettable, even if it costs you the company of those who are unable to see your truth. Being unforgettable has nothing to do with being liked. It has to do with presence, with silent impact, with the kind of energy that, when it enters a room, changes its frequency, and this cannot be bought, begged for, or achieved. With emotional graces, it is built with alignment between who you are on the inside and what you show on the outside. An unforgettable man does not bend because he knows the price of bending. He has already felt the bitter taste of erasing himself to please. He has looked in the mirror and not recognized himself. He has spent nights trying to understand where he went wrong, when in fact the mistake was allowing someone to define his value based on someone else's convenience. But this man wakes up, and when he wakes up, he doesn't go back, because he understands. It's not about winning every game. It's about playing with integrity, about not giving up your essence to gain affection, about not having to beg for love when true love never demands surrender. Machiavelli taught us that lasting power comes from the perception others have of you, but this perception is only strong when you live in coherence, when you stop reacting like a boy and start positioning yourself as a man who does not raise his voice to prove his authority because his very presence already commands respect, who does not shout, "Look at me," because his silence already echoes in the corridors of other people's memories. The truth is this: the more aligned you are with your own truth, the less tolerant you become of falsehood. And that's when many will start calling you cold, arrogant, difficult. But deep down, it's fear. Fear of someone who can no longer be manipulated. Fear of the man who has learned to walk alone, not because he wants to be lonely, but because he will no longer walk with someone who demands that he be annulled. This man does not need to be accepted by everyone. He knows that true approval does not come from outside. It comes from within. It comes from the silence of a clear conscience. It comes from the deep sleep of someone who is no longer selling his soul for crumbs of attention. And here's the bottom line on this journey. You don't need everyone to like you. You need the right ones to respect you. You need the few who truly see value to know that you are steadfast, constant, and non-negotiable. And, more than that you are capable of walking, even when the path is empty. An unforgettable man is one who, when he leaves a mark, because he didn't give himself away cheaply, because he knew how to say no, because he had the courage to be who he was, even when it meant being rejected. But guess what? Rejection never destroys someone who is whole. It only perfects them, it only polishes them, it only strengthens them. You want to know the true test of power? It's not when everyone applauds you. It's when you're rejected for being authentic, and yet you don't bend. You don't change your tune. You don't adapt the truth. You remain you, steady, silent, strategic. Because the man who walks with his truth is never alone. He is accompanied by destiny, and destiny always honors those who have not betrayed themselves. So if you're going to lose someone, let it be for being whole. Let it be for maintaining your essence, because if you have to wear a mask to be loved, then it's not love that they're offering you. It's conditioning. And the price for that is you. Enough of being a slave to affection. Enough of being shaped by other people's expectations. Enough of walking around with your head down, waiting to be validated. Now is the time to stand up, not with anger, but with clarity. Not with shouting, but with determination. Not to prove something, but to live as someone who knows exactly what they are worth. The man who understands this changes his posture, and when the posture changes, the world responds differently. People feel it. The energy is different. You no longer need to run after it, because now you have become the kind of man the world silently respects. If this message touched you, share it with those who need to hear it. Spread this code to those who are tired of living as shadows of their own essence. Let's work together to raise a generation of men who no longer want to be accepted with a mask, but respected with truth, because the game has already begun, and there is only room for two types of men, those who bend and those who become unforgettable. Which one will you be?